Hey everyone, and welcome to The Index. I'm your host, Alex Kehaya, and today I'm excited to introduce Niraj Pant, co-founder of Ritual, an open AI infrastructure network that develops innovative architecture with crowdsourced governance for safety, funding, alignment, and model evolution. Niraj, I'm really excited to have you on the show, and people who've listened to like my last couple episodes know I'm becoming obsessed with AI. So I'm really excited to learn more about Ritual. But before we get into that, maybe just for people who haven't heard of you before or in your background, just give us a brief introduction to how you got to building Ritual.
Sure. And thanks for having me. The story for me starts, I'm originally a cryptographer by background and discovered the crypto space fairly early through mining. That was my first kind of introduction into the space. I was a researcher when I was in school working on privacy for payments and smart contracts. And then in 2017, I joined Polychain as one of the kind of early investors on the team. And I was there for 6 years. I worked across a number of different investment categories, leading deals in areas like privacy, computational integrity, um, bridging, smart contract systems, anything that you can name. I probably had invested in it in that category. Around the launch of ChatGPT a few years ago and some of the later iterations of the GPT models, I started spending a lot of my own time in AI and saw that there were a lot of really interesting use cases and really cool research to be done. And AI, I think, brings about this future in which computers can very effectively and efficiently talk back to us in human language, as at least one of the many factors that make it great. And so this led me to start thinking about, naturally, what are the intersections between AI and crypto? I saw that there was a lot of interesting problems that AI had that we have seen with previous tech platforms, namely centralization, sort of lack of native incentives, and Ritual really is a response to where AI is today, which is a super exciting new technology category with some issues and also opportunities that arise from them that we think crypto AI can bring to us. So that's where we're at today.
What is crypto AI? What does that mean?
Yeah, crypto AI has been a term thrown around for a long time, and where we're at today, maybe I should say, why hasn't crypto AI worked in the past? And why do I think now is the time that it can work? Crypto AI sort of, at a high level, makes sense in the sense that crypto is a technology category that brings sovereignty back to the users. The original design of the internet was a very decentralized future in which you would sort of have, you would kind of keep your own data. You had a relatively good understanding of where your data was being used. Ostensibly, maybe at some point you would have gotten compensated for it. But as we've seen, given many of the major internet real estate is owned by for-profit corporations that are based mostly in the United States, we've tended towards this increased centralization, and now the platforms largely, exploit you rather than kind of work for you. And I think that's a big challenge that we've seen. And so with AI, we're starting to see a very similar sort of centralization. It's a couple of model providers, it's a couple of cloud providers, and it's a very small group of researchers, mostly in San Francisco and a couple of other big U.S. cities. And so, what does crypto provide AI? Is it can provide new guarantees for AI. Because of this unbridledness that you get with AI, which is it tends to move towards centralization, crypto provides you these self-sovereignty guarantees that you typically don't have. So examples of this could be privacy, computational integrity, censorship resistance, and many other things, including be able to attach direct incentives on top of, the utilization and creation of intelligence. So to me, the AI crypto intersection is one in which I think each need each other in many ways. AI needs crypto. AI needs the guarantees you get with crypto. And then the other piece is crypto needs AI. AI, some of the largest products in this category, for example, ChatGPT, got hundreds of millions of users in the matter of months. 100 million users is more than most on-chain users in all of crypto across every blockchain. So I immediately saw that and found an opportunity that we can have something similar happen in crypto and onboard a ton of users through this new paradigm of AI being able to do these new sort of generative tasks. And so that to me is the opportunity set here, is they can kind of intersect and interact with each other in many, many different ways.
I think you really bring up a great point. I had not thought about just trying to copy the onboarding event that happened with OpenAI and leveraging that to drive a mass adoption opportunity for crypto. I think that's a really good point. I've also been exploring the problem spaces and opportunities in AI. I think I'm definitely not as I don't have any level of expertise. I claim to have any expertise in it, but it has been sort of a passion project of mine for the last couple of months. Mainly because I've been looking into the cloud computing market and bare metal hardware a lot in the past couple of years. And I've realized that market is really a race to the bottom, and that unless you're a hyperscale like Amazon, or like AWS or GCP or Azure, you're really going to have a tough time competing. And so I started looking at what kind of things can you bundle together to create value and compete on value instead of price. And I landed on AI. I was like, AI needs tons of hardware, needs a lot of compute, and it's a super valuable service. But it has a really big problem for enterprises. And I think for normal people too, I just don't think they're quite as aware of it, in that when you use ChatGPT or like OpenAI, you're just giving them your data and it's training their AI. And you talk about sovereignty in crypto. Why should an enterprise give up their most valuable asset, which is their data? They should hold on to that data. They should own it, and it should have value. And I think that there are some very interesting technologies coming that are going to enable that. And it's closer than I thought. I think that it's not here quite yet where it will work. You're understand cryptography at a much deeper level than I do, but things like fully homomorphic encryption, zero knowledge proofs, and even I just came across Nillion Network. I don't know if you've heard of that company, but I read their white paper and I was like, if this stuff checks out, maybe you can tell me if you've read their white paper. I'm like, because I'm not educated enough or an expert enough to read that white paper and be like, wow, this actually makes sense and will work the way they say it will. But when I read it, I was like, man, this is part of the solution I've been looking for, and it they did do a good job of, there's this chart in that white paper that compares zero knowledge proof and fully homomorphic encryption and NPC, and kind of talks about the differences. That was super helpful for me. Understanding for zero knowledge proof technology, I guess the data still has to be encrypted. It's decrypted at some point to be used. It's not fully encrypted the entire time. But just to bring it back to earth here for people who don't know about encryption and stuff. In order for AI to, in order for consumers and enterprises to maintain sovereignty over their data, you need privacy. And in order to have privacy, you need cryptography. And I find that very exciting. And I think if you combine cryptography with decentralized compute, all of a sudden you just unlock these crazy use cases that people probably don't really imagine are possible. And I also think there's another thing. People think that hardware, most companies think that GPUs are hard to come by. Most people who are building AI, it's man, GPUs, H100s, A100s, they're very hard to come by. Actually, there's a lot of them. You just have to know how to get to them. And a lot of it, people are accessing them through these marketplaces these open source permissionless marketplaces like a Cache, like Render Network. I even saw a company that's not like a blockchain based marketplace, but it's more like a traditional Web 2 one called Vast AI, that a couple of guys that I used to work with at Orchid spun out. And so there's this like interesting thing where like, it's actually DPIN is like the thing that people call it now, decentralized physical infrastructure. But these are essentially DPIN projects that are bringing access to GPUs at scale. And I'm so excited about the potential. So like, how does Ritual, how does what you're building fit into this picture? Like there's a lot, I really feel like we need to draw an actual diagram of the different parts that make all this work so people can visualize it. I'm kind of a visual learner, but like, how does what you guys are doing fit into that landscape?
The goal of what we're trying to build is the big opportunity set that we see is this Web3 AI market today is not massive, it's small, but it's growing really, really fast. And we're building for that market. There's certainly a very big Web2 market that will potentially enter at some point, but there's a lot of people doing that. And we're really interested in the crypto native use cases. Because I think that will bring a lot of usage to blockchains, and it's something that I think we can uniquely kind of onboard. So where do we fit in? What Ritual does is it sort of acts as a conduit between different blockchains and AI models. So dApp developers are able to very easily, in a few lines of code, take a model that they may want to use in their dApp. Let's say Llama 2. They can say, I want Llama 2. These are the features I want. And perhaps they do some fine tuning on it for some special results. And then they take the user input and then they feed that off to our network. Our network, Infernet is the kind of first version of what we've built, like Internet with an F. Infernet is an off-chain compute, set of nodes that allows you to basically dispatch these requests onto this off-chain network. The off-chain network does the work, optionally provides a proof of varying types, just depending on the use case, and then returns the result back to the dApp. So that's where we're focused on the workflow. On the GPU side of things, we both have sort of our own that'll be sort of native to the network. Then we also partner with other GPU services that are bringing tons of GPUs from different countries to come in and fulfill these requests. On the privacy side, privacy is a pretty important thing to us. As you mentioned, a corporation can say that they're keeping the data private, but you never know. There's always tampering issues, or even from the perspective of security, an external attacker can come in and go and find data. So in some ways it's good if it's not even there, or it's just held with the user, which I think is a little bit of a better security model. So we're developing a series of new privacy techniques of some of the classes that you mentioned, just depending on the type of model that we service. And it's a long process. Some of these things like FHE, for example, as you mentioned, they're becoming more efficient, but they're still quite early. And so doing privacy on, say, a GPT 3.5 style model, doing inference on it is still relatively slow to do. But I think we'll get to the point where that's efficient to do. But all of these other pieces, I think, are within the realm of possibility. And so we're building all these pieces with the kind of application user and ultimately the developer that's creating that use case in mind.
Interesting. So it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you guys are really focused more on the inference side of things, where like a app developer or dApp developer wants to have their data leverage like Llama 2 to enable AI in their apps. And so the data gets sent to the network runs the inference on it, and it gets a result back, right? It's like asking GPT a question and you get the answer back. It's the same thing. And I think, again, for people listening, like, because I'm still learning here and maybe you are too, there's you have to train a model and it learns how to do things, and then and that's a separate process. And then there's inference, which is actually like using the model, which it took me forever to figure that out. It sounds stupid to say, but it really did. I mean, it was just kind of like jargon getting thrown around for me for a long time. But am I correct in saying that's what Ritual does, and at least that first step that you talked about in the app integrations?
That's right. I mean, to put some more color to it, we view, we kind of treat models as first-class citizens in our network. So really a lot of what we've built is around servicing AI models. And we support a variety of different tasks on those models. The most important one in our case being inference. But we support fine-tuning, which you can think of as a very specialized, narrow form of training. So just taking some new examples and kind of updating the model for a certain specific use case. Model quantization is another use case. So we don't focus on training today. That is, there are other teams in the space that are really interested in that. And this is also not to go too much on a tangent, but also understanding the provenance of data that goes into the model, because we don't really have a lot of transparency into that, even in the centralized open source models today. And so I think a great future is one in which we have a full understanding of what data is going into the model that we can then track all the way through the training process and then to the end inference process. And I think that's important for provenance of data and ultimately having some sort of understanding of how the results are actually being generated in some capacity.
Very interesting. Do you so it's also one thing I really like about what you're doing, and I notice it's kind of similar to Nillion Network, because I just read their white paper, but it's essentially it's not a blockchain. It's just a separate like overlay network, right? Like you're not building your own blockchain network. You just have a network of compute that enables the inference to happen. And so it can work with anything. It can work on any chain, or any app developer could use it. Who runs the nodes? Who's going to run this network? Is it a bunch of individuals? Like, what's the ideal there? What kind of hardware do they need? If so, can you just tell me more about how that works?
Sure. Today, it's largely us and other kind of large groups that have access to a lot of GPUs. But there are also individuals that are running nodes on this network. It's a fairly simple and kind of painless process to set up. At least we hope. Should take 15 minutes to set up, and ultimately, this is a network that is getting a kind of a heterogeneous set of compute tasks. Maybe it's inference on a really tiny model. Maybe it's inference on 5 different models, and they're being composed together. And so what we are set up to do from a network standpoint is we do want a lot of people to be able to participate in the network. So for, say, inference on Llama 2.7b, you don't really need an H100 to do inference on it. You could do it with a less capable GPU, or you could use a cluster of a few GPUs to do the inference. And so we want, at a point to make this network as open as possible, while also maintaining the flexibility of sort of the SLAs that you may want in your application or applications. So if you care a lot about performance and privacy and all this stuff, you probably will need the beefiest hardware on the network, and that's something that we have the capability to be able to route into that network. Whereas some people are fine with some performance degradation, and they are able to go to maybe the weaker hardware, which will be a more sort of a more open group of people.
What does that look like in practice? It's like I can go to your site, I can see the various networks that are available for me to do my inference on, and there's some details there that help me assess if it's, like hardware spec or provider or something like that. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, exactly. So what would happen is a request would be dispatched from a network. So let's say it comes from Base. So an application on Base would say, hey, I have this request, sends it to the network. the network goes and pairs you with the appropriate network or appropriate node on the network.
Mm-hmm.
That'll then do the result or get the result, and then spit that back out to the end app. So it's really kind of a chain-driven process of chain wants result, goes to the network does the work, and then it spits it back out. So it really is meant to be something that plugs into many different places, and GPU providers on our network are able to do opportunities across many different networks.
And how does the network communicate to the app that it's how does the GPU, like the server, communicate to the app that it's got the right chops to do the job, for like lack of a better word, right? Like the right resume. You can kind of think of it as like a resume. Like I've performed really well over the last 6 months, and I've got great hardware available, and those kinds of things. Like, does it work like that? Like, how do you know you're going to get quality service? Because you mentioned that that's like a concern, right? So how does that actually work in the process of base connecting to the network?
So this is something we'll be releasing a blog post on in the next hopefully the next couple of weeks. The idea, we can borrow a lot of things from the proof of stake world and the proof of work world. The proof of stake world is good in the sense that, for example, in Cosmos has sort of historically had, uptime slashing, and networks have different things that they score their validators on. Sometimes it's uptime, sometimes it's sort of reliability, and then there's also the social elements of it as well. Some validator networks, or I should say, some validators have a brand that they use consistently across different networks, and over time they develop this weak reputation that people start to associate them with. And so those are more of the kind of crypto economic, kind of softer forms of guarantees that we can definitely leverage in something like this. We can also do things like in networks like Filecoin or in Alio. They are able to issue these challenges to network providers to basically, in some ways, test their capacity. Filecoin has the process where they're constantly, testing. If you're storing all pieces of a file, that was a concern for a long time. Was, what if you're only storing 1/8 of the file and not the entire thing? So it's early for us, given there's a lot more to build, but this is like a flavor of the types of things that we're exploring for reputation on the network. Really cool.
I mean, it just your explanation really highlights all how like complex these solutions are, right? Like the interface should be pretty simple, right? I'm an app developer. I'm going to send a request and I get a response back. It's like, it sounds pretty simple, but like the actual execution of that and providing quality service in a decentralized fashion is very hard. And I mean, that kind of leads me to my next question. Like, you want it to be more, it sounds like right now it's you plus a couple other groups that are providing GPUs to the network, and you're sort of in this beginning stage, like maybe I don't know if you would call it a beta or like an alpha of the network. But what's your end state? Like, what does censorship resistance look like? What does decentralization mean for you guys? Like, how are you defining success? Like a year, 12 months, 18 months from now, whatever it is, and you're talking to your team, you have like this victory speech, like we are the most censorship resistant AI network. Like, what is that? What's in the speech?
Yeah. There's a couple of different cuts on how you can think about censorship resistance. One is, when we first started the company, ChatGPT was not available in, I think, 50 or 60 countries or something like that. And, not all of them were sanctioned countries either. They were just like, didn't have support or whatever. So our view is building an open common layer on a blockchain, and then being able to remove ourselves and the network still being able to operate. So the network needs to be set up in a way that all of the actors are able to continue performing their function, and they're kind of well set up to do that, such that, if I were to go away for 5 years, I could come back and reliably say that the network is still running. So that's one of the criteria that we care about a lot. Another one is, broadly building up a big ecosystem of dApps and model creators that are using this thing, such that once all of these things are, you know, there's sort of a kind of a timeline of decentralization that we need to hit. You've seen this with the layer twos. A lot of them start, fairly centralized, get a bunch of usage, and then are slowly decentralizing over time. And that's kind of the tact that we're taking. And it's basically the same framework. It's like, where are pieces that we can start picking off and fitting in decentralized solutions? So there's a piece of this now, which is building in model storage capabilities into all of the nodes, or being able to offer different types of integrity proofs. So depending on, again, the type of guarantees you may need for your dApp, like if you're a DeFi app and you're using an ML controller to adjust the parameters of the network or to generate yield or something, you're probably going to want pretty high levels of integrity because it's touching a real system and it has money in it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you're doing you're building something like Instagram on chain, you may not need the strongest proof in the world to say, hey, this recommendation system output like the thing that I wanted to. So those are, I think, the metrics of what we're looking for. And ultimately, I think, want to follow the model of groups that have decentralized very effectively. I think Ethereum has done a great job, broad set of kind of node decentralization, and also mindshare decentralization, I think, is important too. New groups that are bringing new ideas and updating the code and things of that nature is very important. So it's an active topic of discussion for us internally on how best and how effectively we can decentralize what we're building.
And as far as like, do you have like, the way I think about it for Solana, for example, is like, how many nodes can we get in as many individual data center locations and ASNs on the planet? That's like the physical hardware, decentralization, censorship resistance, and then their stake distribution, right? Those are the two things that I think like weight decentralization. Is there like a number of nodes and then that you need to hit, that you want to hit, like, or that this thing wants it with like individual operators running those nodes, running the network, providing services. And then so that's question number one. And then my next question has more to do with like accessing the network. So, I like Akash because Greg, you probably know Greg from Akash, like super hardcore open source guy, right? They have like really leaned into that, and everything they build all the way to the front end that is like a SaaS product for accessing the network is open source. And so why is that awesome? Well, if they went away for 5 years or their company blew up, or something like that, all the contracts are on chain and that interface is open source. So it just takes one person to figure out how to spin it up and boom, you can access the marketplace. And I bet you can access it via command line. So it's like, I guess I'm like wondering how many nodes and does decentralization and physical location matter for you? And then access to those nodes. And then my last question is the token, but we can get to that in a second. I'm assuming there's some kind of token involved here, but let's get to the first two first.
So number of nodes is a really good question, because there's also a piece of it of some of the nodes are going to need to be beefier than others. And those things tend towards just bigger entities running them. I really like what GeoHot is doing with his company.
What's the company?
He's got GeoHot's company, I think it's called Tiny Corporation. And what they build, what they're building in the AI world, the way that people in the AI world think about decentralization is they think about a lot of these problems too, but their approach to it is less, I'd say it's less cryptography focused, and it's more based on being able to do AI things locally. So you can almost think of it like doing edge computing.
Yeah.
So they care a lot about, the dream of every AI decentralization person that maybe doesn't care about crypto is everyone has a home box that's,
with their AI on it.
GPUs,
Yeah.
and they can run anything they
Yeah.
want. And I think that's a really cool mission. It's going to be tricky for, a lot of people, but I think we should go towards that. And so we would really love a future in which that happens. And those people are also contributing network, contributing capacity in the off cycles to our network. So number of nodes, it's hard to put a number on it, but certainly thousands, maybe even tens of thousands at least. And obviously scale up depending on how much traction this space gets over time.
I find this conversation so interesting because I'm starting to see, um, there's layers here for the kinds of services you can provide, and there are layers here for how you can get nodes on your network, and there's composability across multiple other kinds of networks that are providing different value that like ritual users who want to run a node can contribute it via some of these other networks. Like I'm thinking about Koi Network is one that's coming out. I don't know if you've seen those guys. I can send you information on them, but they essentially like a compute marketplace sort of. It's like it's an SVM fork. And you can basically like list tasks. You download their app onto your computer, and if you got GPUs there and the task requires GPUs, it will just run the task. And then there's like render and a cache, right? Like they're all that they have a ton of GPUs in those networks that obviously would work. They might not be beefy ones. The cache ones could be beefy. They could be pretty beefy because they have like tier 1 data centers available as providers through their interface. And so I find that, I find the connection, the composability between these networks to be very fascinating. Like I'm just listening to you talk and my brain is kind of going off on all these different protocols and stuff that I've been getting to know over the last several years that fit in, and you're not even competitive. Like none of this is competing against the other thing. Like I just talked to 2 days ago, I talked to the founder of BagelNet, who I met through CoinFund because they were my lead investor in my last company. And have you heard of Bagel? Have you heard of these guys?
I have.
Yeah. So for bid on the founder, and I got on a phone call, and I've been like looking for he's possibly building one of the solutions to the privacy angle, right? For both the LLM and the data. And that kind of thing actually would enable the use case you were talking about, where you could run on a local machine at your house and like use personal data, or at an enterprise, like on-prem, use sensitive business data on an LLM that's totally proprietary. It doesn't even have to be an open source LLM. And all of a sudden it unlocks all these use cases that you can't do right now because we don't have the privacy guarantees. Now, I haven't seen their white paper. Again, I'm not technical enough you would be able to like look at their tech and probably be like, yeah, this makes sense or not. Please tell me if it doesn't later, if you've read the white paper. But it's a really exciting time. And so I guess I want to let you answer the second part of the question though, about access. So how do you deal with access? Because again, if you go away, like Ritual evaporates, you want the network to still run without you. Your company evaporates, right? So how do you deal with accessing the network in a permissionless, like censorship resistant way? What ideas do you guys have for that?
The thing that we're working on today is broadly, how do we increase the number of people running nodes and making this a really good opportunity for people to run nodes? So in some ways that comes downstream from distribution and usage. We just want a ton of dApps constantly doing inference requests and fine tuning, such that there's a very active network of tasks that the GPU networks or the individual GPUs can go and pull down, and they can say, hey, like you said, there's a very big range of the types of people that'll be running nodes. It could be myself with my home rig plugging into this network whenever I'm not using it. It could be a Bitcoin miner that has access to not Bitcoin miners, but to GPUs that use the same power setup that they have. And so the first piece is like increasing the number of nodes and broadly distribution to those things. And then it's starting to build, bring in other people from the community to start building new solutions. So maybe it's in some of these networks, they run the Ritual node client alongside their node implementation. and you're able to run these two things together. And now you're building a system where it's not just reliant on, Ritual is pushing out this message and getting people to do things. It's now demand comes from other places, supply comes from other places, other people are contributing to the network. There's a lot of, I think, pieces that we really want to have and make sure is ready over the next couple of years to solve a lot of these issues.
I find this so fascinating. I've thought about something similar for like Helium, for example. Helium is essentially a mobile virtual network operator, right? That's what the company is operating. And then the network itself is all the people running the towers. But because it's all open source software, like anybody I could launch my own virtual network operator that just uses Helium as the backbone. Right now, you have to Helium has this partnership with T-Mobile where if you're not covered by a Helium node in your area, there's not enough bandwidth around there. Well, you're just on T-Mobile now. And that's how these virtual mobile network operators operate. That's how they work. But like to get a subscription, that's like you go to a website and you buy a mobile phone subscription. That's just an interface. It's just an interface that you pay for something and then it allows your phone to configure to connect to this network. And I think what you're talking about is kind of similar. It's like, so you could just have an open source template that people can host to provide services to create demand, right? Like, for the GPUs. Like, so you're saying like node operators can also be the vendor of the service, the value added service on top of whatever the node is providing. Like it could run a couple of different models in my corner of the network, and I can use my interface to drive people to use the services that I'm providing along with other people in the network. If I understood you correctly, that's kind of what it sounded like. So node operators will eventually be, in your opinion, full stack businesses that are offering compute with services that could be like SaaS services, or they could be like enterprise level service offerings too, like helping people do it for them or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. It would be an amazing future if people are able to almost operate their own businesses running nodes on this network. And I think Helium is a really apt analogy. Helium's mobile network was not possible 10 years ago. It took a series of innovations to allow that to happen. One being the creation of this new, it's like called lightly licensed spectrum. And basically it's this spectrum that the US government has opened up for people to create their own cell services. So Helium, there's a company called Really that's doing this in Austin. There is, that opening up is then what allowed all these new businesses to flourish and create this kind of decentralized future where you can run a cell tower, or you can even be a user and access this network at a way cheaper rate, because the utilities today do take a very fat rake for something that is, many ways it can be kind of broken. And the opportunity here with AI crypto is today, you as an individual cannot really participate in the growth of this industry. Some of the groups you mentioned that are doing, GPU as a service, bare metal as a service, they're just doing all the GPUs themselves, or they're sourcing it themselves. Whereas with a network like Ritual and many of these other sort of GPU as a service networks, you can plug your GPU in and do the work yourself, and kind of like what you can do with, in the Bitcoin network or in the Filecoin network. So you're exactly right. I think it's a really exciting new opportunity that's been opened up, largely by, I think, the timing of what's going on.
Yeah. And so how does the token work? Is there a token?
We're not sharing information on anything here yet. I think what we're focused on really is getting distribution and broadly growing the pie of crypto AI applications. I think we really want to see AI be the biggest leader of transaction volume in the crypto space. Because, we talked earlier on the podcast about ChatGPT and how it got so many users so fast. So that's inspired me and inspired the team to say, what are ways that we can bring that to crypto? How do we expand the TAM, bring people from outside of crypto into this space? And AI could be that thing. OpenAI just released something really interesting today.
I know.
Text to video model. It's crazy,
I was going
right?
to bring it up with you because it was, I am honestly like terrified and excited at the same time. I've actually never had this feeling when I looked at a technology or a demo of a technology, but seeing Sora today, I'm like a little bit afraid. I'm like actually afraid, because it's so good. It seems so good. And, you're watching Sam like tweet all the examples because people are giving him prompts and tweets, and he's just banging out like examples. And you're like, wow, it must be pretty quick. It must be pretty responsive to these these prompts. If it's that responsive that he's able to just like whip them and share them like in minutes, what's gonna like how far away are we from the Matrix? Like actual like AI simulation that just like constructs the world around you. I mean, it's crazy. It's kind of unbelievable to see that. Maybe I'm having an overreaction, but it feels that way to me,
No, I think that's right. I mean, the things that he generated were not like normal queries. It wasn't like a guy drinking a bottle of water. It was like a turtle in like a bling zoo. It's just really weird, interesting stuff.
Yeah. And in high fidelity though, like there was one on their website, a California town during the gold rush. And I was like, it was so detailed. It takes the whole corpus of data of the entire internet and it constructs a movie quality scene with, I'm not that detail of an oriented person, so I'm sure someone with a keener eye than me would notice any weird things in the generated footage. It looked pretty flawless to me. Like I'm looking at it, I'm like, this looks like it's a cinematic, quality trailer for a Gold Rush movie or something.
Yeah. Imagine once we start watching full-length movies that are generated with AI.
With prompts.
And, yeah, exactly. And the Brad Pitt of 2034 might not even be a human. Might just be an LLM character that we really like and we start, kind of using often. And, maybe movies are kind of like interactive storybooks like we have in games where, oh, I really don't like that LLM actress. I'm going to like replace her with this one and make the story a little different. And it's going to be insane.
Yeah, but 2034, I don't know, man. I think it's like 3 months from now. I think it's, I think it's like 2024.5. Like, right? Because this just seems to be accelerating. And I know this is like the meme of crypto Twitter is like accelerating versus decelerating. That one also took me forever to figure out what people were talking about. But I think I get it now. But yeah, it just seems to be accelerating in my whole life, I don't think I've seen technology move this fast. Like between like crypto, since I've been in this space in crypto since 2016. But I've also started to view the future, which my show is about the future of the internet, and Web3 to me has become really about the future of the internet, which for me is AI, blockchain technology, AR and VR. Like the new internet is these things. And it's at a break. I never imagined it would move this fast. And so, yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's sooner than we think. We'll have those automated, personalized, Grammy-winning movies. So we're sort of coming up to the top of the show, and I know you probably have a hard stop at the top of the hour. But what is it like? What have I not asked you that I should have asked? I ask every guest this at the end of the show.
The thing I would sort of implore people to do that are interested in this space is go check out the stuff and start playing with it. Our Ritual Infernet system is fully open source, so you can go and start building applications. We released a demo of an application called FriendRug, FRENRUG.
Yeah.
And the basic idea of FriendRug was to show off both the ritual infrastructure and then to show off how you can build an AI application in crypto. So the idea is, I should say, it's actually live. You can go play with it. we trained up a popular open source LLM on a bunch of examples. And then we took that bot and stuck it behind a friend tech room. And so you enter the room, and what you try to do with the bot is you try to convince it to buy your keys. So I've seen the weirdest, types of responses. Everything from, points gun at bot, give me the, buy my keys or else. Really kind of long drawn, kind of intimate plays on how to get the keys bought. And what this really showed on the back end was we used a couple of different LLM instances to show kind of the kind of stochasticity of responses. Those are fed into a classifier, and using ZKML, we're proving that result on chain, and then you're getting the result. And it's for the most part, especially for a couple of week hack, is fairly responsive and easy to use. So I would say that, and then I would also say, I think once a lot of crypto people, once they start to do some of the ML 101 education, they start to see where the things click in together and where there's really interesting use cases. So I'd recommend people go do even a cursory look at some of the recent LLM videos. Andre Karpathy does some really good ones. Go look at some of the old stuff. Andrew Ng does some really good stuff. And it'll really connect a lot of really interesting concepts. I've said before, the Bitcoin white paper for many people in this space was like a coming to God moment. It was something so interesting and different. And I would say that was similar for me with LLMs. It felt like a divine creation. It felt so weird, like how does this even work? So anyways, those are the kind of couple of things that I would say on, I'd say as maybe closing remarks from at least that question.
Awesome. Well, look, I really appreciate you taking the time. It was a fascinating conversation, and I look forward to seeing Ritual succeed. And with that, yeah, we'll sign off. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.